I turned my head and suddenly our faces were just inches apart. Evelyn. His voice was low, uncertain. I don't know if I moved first or if he did, but the moment our lips met, something inside me shattered. It wasn't soft or hesitant. It was hungry. His hands found my waist, pulling me closer as I melted into him. My body, my mind, everything betrayed me. A part of me screamed to stop, but another part, the part that had been craving something I couldn't name, didn't want to. I kissed him like I had been waiting for this. He kissed me passionately like no one has ever done. As he kissed, he held my breast tight like he wouldn't want to lose it. A few minutes later, he took me from the back, just the way I love it. Let me pause for a second. If you've made it this far, you are clearly intrigued. This is just the beginning of this explosive tale. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more stories like this. Trust me, it gets more interesting. Let's go back to how it all began. My name is Evelyn, and I was a bride when I met the man I would betray my husband with. It was my wedding day, a day that should have been the beginning of my forever with Dennis, the man I had loved for 5 years. Dennis was kind, patient, everything a woman could want in a husband. I should have been blissfully happy. But looking back, I realized something felt off. And that's when he appeared, Adrian, the wedding photographer. The moment I saw him, something inside me shifted. It was a flash, a second, a heartbeat. But in that brief moment, it was as if his camera lens had captured something I didn't even know was missing inside me. The morning of the wedding was a blur of preparations, hair, makeup, the rustling of satin, and the sound of laughter echoing through the bridal suite. My bridesmaids were buzzing with excitement, but I felt an odd sense of detachment, as if I was watching everything happen from a distance. And then, amid the chaos, he arrived. Adrian. He was setting up his cameras, adjusting the lighting, checking angles. Dark hair, sharp jawline, piercing eyes that seemed to see through everything. He wasn't just taking pictures, he was studying me. Our eyes met, and I felt something strange, a sudden warmth, a pulse in my veins that shouldn't have been there. Mrs. Evelyn, could you turn your head slightly? Perfect. His voice was smooth, steady. I turned, the lace of my dress brushing against my skin, my heart racing for no reason. Why was my skin tingling? Why did I feel this rush of adrenaline? I shook it off. I was just nervous. This was my wedding day, after all. The ceremony went as planned, the vows, the kiss, the applause. Dennis held my hand so tenderly, so genuinely. He was overjoyed, his face lit with love, but a part of me felt strangely distant. As we walked down the aisle, petals floating around us, Adrian's camera flashed in my direction. Click, a single frame. And in that frozen moment, our eyes locked again. It wasn't long, it wasn't obvious. But in that stolen second, something shifted between us. It wasn't love, it wasn't even attraction, it was curiosity. By the time we reached the reception, the champagne was flowing, the music was loud, and guests were lost in the celebration. Dennis was across the room, deep in conversation with family members. I was alone for a moment, adjusting my veil near the dance floor, when I heard a voice behind me. You look beautiful through the lens, but even more stunning outside of it. I turned. Adrian stood there, camera hanging around his neck, watching me. It was an innocent compliment, but something about the way he said it sent a shiver through me. Thank you, I said, trying to sound unaffected. He stepped closer, adjusting the sheer fabric of my veil where it had slipped from my hair. His fingers barely brushed against my skin, but it was electric. "Sorry," he murmured, his voice lower. "Didn't mean to overstep." I should have stepped back. I should have ended it there. Instead, I let my eyes linger on him for just a second too long. The night carried on, and I did my best to ignore the strange pull I felt toward Adrian. But the tension had already settled between us. He was everywhere, snapping photos, moving through the guests, blending into the background. But every time I looked up, he was looking at me. A flicker of a smile, a subtle glance, a charged silence. It was harmless. At least that's what I told myself. But deep down, I already knew. This wasn't the last time I would see Adrian, and something inside me was already craving the next moment. They say the devil doesn't show up with horns and fire. He comes dressed as everything you've ever wanted. For me, the devil came with the camera in his hands and a stare that could unravel me with a single glance. His name was Adrian, and the day I crossed the line, I told myself it wasn't cheating. It was just a moment. But one moment is all it takes for a fire to start. 3 weeks had passed since the wedding, and life had settled into the routine of marriage. Dennis was wonderful, caring, attentive, the husband I had always imagined. But somehow I felt empty. I couldn't explain it, and I hated myself for even thinking it. I should have been grateful, happy. Instead, my mind kept drifting to something, or rather, someone. Then one afternoon, a message lit up my phone screen. Adrian. "Hey, Evelyn. The wedding photos are ready. Thought you'd like a sneak peek before I send them over." My heart skipped. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Me. "That would be great. When can I see them?" His response came almost instantly. Adrian. "You free this evening? My studio isn't far from you." I hesitated. I should have told him to send them digitally. I should have said I'd wait. But instead, my fingers typed out something reckless. Me. "I can come by at 7. I didn't tell Dennis." That was my first real lie. I arrived at his studio just as the sun was setting. The small space was dimly lit, warm, filled with framed photos of past weddings. Adrian was waiting by the door, a casual smirk playing on his lips. "Didn't think you'd actually come," he said. I swallowed hard. Why wouldn't I? He studied me for a second, his gaze sharp. "I don't know. You just seem like the type who doesn't take unnecessary risks." I should have left right then. The air between us was already charged, and we both knew it. But I stepped inside. We sat side by side, flipping through the wedding album on his laptop. Photo after photo, me in my white dress, Dennett looking at me with love, guests laughing, dancing, celebrating. But then Adrian pulled up a different set of pictures. Shots that weren't posed. Me adjusting my veil with a distant look in my eyes. Me staring at the dance floor, lost in thought. Me and Adrian, our gazes locked in the reflection of a mirror. I sucked in a breath. I didn't know you took these." "You looked beautiful," he murmured. My pulse jumped. He leaned in slightly, his shoulder brushing against mine. It was a small touch, but I felt it everywhere. And then it happened. Our hands brushed against each other on the keyboard. I should have pulled away. I should have laughed it off. Instead, I let my fingers linger. That was my second mistake. The air became thick. I turned my head, and suddenly our faces were just inches apart. "Evelyn." His voice was low, uncertain. I don't know if I moved first or if he did, but the moment our lips met, something inside me shattered. It wasn't soft or hesitant, it was hungry. His hands found my waist, pulling me closer as I melted into him. My body, my mind, everything betrayed me. A part of me screamed to stop, but another part, the part that had been craving something I couldn't name, didn't want to. I kissed him like I had been waiting for this, because maybe I had. I don't know how long it lasted. It could have been seconds, minutes, an eternity. When we finally pulled apart, I was breathless, shaken to my core. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, exhaling deeply. I, I shouldn't have done that. I laughed bitterly. Then why didn't we stop? He didn't answer. He just looked at me, eyes dark, filled with something I wasn't ready to name. Guilt should have hit me harder than it did. I was a married woman. I had a husband who loved me, and yet all I could think about was how badly I wanted more. That night, I went home to Dennis. He greeted me with a kiss, oblivious, telling me how much he missed me, how he wished we had spent the evening together. I smiled, kissed him back, and told him I loved him. And the worst part? I meant it. I still loved Dennis. But now I also craved Adrian, and once a fire is lit, it doesn't just go out. If you had asked me a month before my wedding if I'd ever cheat on my husband, I would have laughed in your face. Me, never. And yet, here I was, lying, sneaking, hiding. The first time with Adrian should have been the last. It should have been a mistake, a regret to be buried deep where no one would ever find it. But I didn't stop, because the truth was I didn't want to. At home, I was still the perfect wife. I cooked dinner, I kissed Dennis goodnight, I listened when he talked about his day. But inside, I was burning for the next stolen moment, the next excuse to slip away. It didn't take long before Adrian and I found ways to keep the fire going. The stolen touches became secret meetings. The secret meetings became hotel rooms. And every time I told myself, this is the last time, I knew I was lying. I had stepped into a different world, a world where I wasn't just Dennis's wife. I was desired. I was reckless. I was alive. It started slow. A coffee shop here, a quick lunch there, then came the nights. We didn't do the cliche, let's meet at my place thing. That would have been too obvious, too dangerous. Instead, we met in places that didn't leave traces. A boutique hotel with dim lighting and silk sheets. The first time, I walked into the room with my heart racing so fast I thought I might faint. Adrian was already waiting, leaning against the window, his shirt sleeves rolled up, watching me like he was starving. And God help me. I wanted to be devoured. I remember standing in front of him, my fingers shaking as I reached for the buttons of my dress. He stopped me, took my hands in his. "You don't have to do this," he said, but his voice was thick, and we both knew he didn't mean it. I swallowed hard. I want to. And the moment he kissed me, every part of me, the wife, the woman who once vowed to be faithful, disappeared. All that was left was fire. The more time I spent with Adrian, the easier it became to lie to Dennis. I became an expert in excuses. I have a late meeting. I'm catching up with an old friend. I'm picking something up from the store. Each lie came smoother than the last. And Dennis, he never doubted me. That was the worst part. He trusted me completely. And every time he smiled at me with love in his eyes, the guilt should have crushed me. But instead, it made the thrill even stronger. But lies are like cracks in a glass. They start small, barely noticeable. until one day everything shatters, and I was making mistakes. One night, Dennis reached for my phone while I was in the shower. I had a missed call from Adrian. By the time I came out, Dennis was holding my phone, his brows furrowed. "Who's Adrian?" My heart nearly stopped. I forced a laugh. "Oh, the photographer from our wedding. He was just checking in about the final album." Dennis nodded, but I saw something shift in his expression, a seed of doubt. That was the first warning, and I ignored it. But the real problem, I wasn't just cheating on Dennis. I was falling for Adrian, because it wasn't just about the sex anymore. It was the way he looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. It was the way he whispered my name like it was a prayer. And it was the way when I was with him, I didn't feel like someone's wife. I felt like me. One night, Adrian pulled me close, his breath warm against my ear. "Do you ever think about leaving him?" The question hit me like a truck. I pulled back, blinking fast. "What?" He searched my face. "You don't love him the way you used to, and you love this us." My throat went dry. I couldn't answer, because the truth was terrifying. Did I still love Dennis, or had I already left him in my heart? Some mistakes you can fix, others you just learn to live with. The thing about secrets, they don't stay buried forever. No matter how careful you are, no matter how much you think you're in control, the truth always finds a way out. And when it did, it didn't just break me, it destroyed everything. The night it all fell apart started just like any other. Dennis was on the couch, watching a game, relaxed and completely unaware. I was texting Adrian. It was reckless, I know. But at that point, I was too deep to stop. "Adrian, can I see you tomorrow?" I smiled to myself, my fingers already typing a response, when suddenly, "Who are you texting?" I froze. Dennis was looking at me, his expression casual, but his eyes were sharp. I forced a laugh. "Oh, just a friend." His jaw twitched. "Which friend?" A wave of cold panic washed over me. Dennis never questioned me. Never. Something was wrong, very, very wrong. I tried to shake it off, but my nerves were shot. That night, Dennis kissed me goodnight like usual. He pulled me close, whispered he loved me, and yet something felt different. I should have paid attention to the way he held me, just a little too tight. Because what I didn't know was that Dennis already knew. The next morning, I woke up late. Dennis had already left for work, or so I thought. I was stepping out of the shower when I heard a voice behind me. "Where were you really last night?" I spun around, water dripping from my hair, my towel wrapped tight around me. Dennis was standing in the doorway. His face was unreadable. "What?" I forced a smile. "I was home." He sighed, rubbing his jaw. "Evelyn, don't lie to me." Panic flared in my chest. I don't know what you're talking about." He stared at me, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I know about Adrian." The world tilted. My stomach dropped. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Dennis nodded slowly, as if he had been hoping, praying I'd deny it. But my silence said everything. He knew. And suddenly, my carefully built house of lies collapsed. Dennis didn't yell. He didn't throw things. He just sat down on the edge of the bed, his face blank. "How long?" His voice was hollow. I swallowed hard. "Dennis, how long?" I looked away. "A few months." He let out a breath, shaking his head, like he was trying to stop himself from falling apart. Then he laughed, a short, bitter sound. "All this time I thought I was making you happy." He met my gaze, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw something I never thought I'd see in his eyes. Disgust. It hurt. It should have hurt. But part of me, the selfish, twisted part of me, felt relieved because the truth was finally out. And now I didn't have to pretend anymore. Dennis didn't ask me to stay. He didn't beg. He didn't fight. Instead, he stood up, grabbed his keys, and walked to the door. You made your choice, Evelyn. His voice was eerily calm. I hope he was worth it. Then, just like that, he was gone. I sat there, staring at the empty doorway, waiting for the tears to come, but they didn't, because deep down I knew I had lost Dennis long before this moment. Adrian wanted to be with me. At least that's what he said. But the thrill of secrecy was gone. The passion, the excitement, the danger, it all disappeared the moment we didn't have to hide. And without all that, we had nothing. Within weeks, Adrian and I fell apart. Turns out he never wanted me. He just wanted the chase. And so here I am, alone, waking up in an empty bed, no husband, no Adrian, no stolen moments, just the weight of my own choices. And the only question that haunts me now is, was it worth it? I don't know. All I know is you can't rewrite the past. You can only live with it.